To the casual observer, the name Sun Tzu typically evokes images of epic battlefields, brilliant generals, and perhaps even those catchy strategy memes enthusiastically shared by entrepreneurs who may not have delved into his original text. He is often revered as a sagely philosopher of victory, a sort of mystical intellect who somehow divined the intricate psychology of conflict. Yet, this popular interpretation fundamentally misrepresents his true genius. Once we peel back the layers of popular slogans and mythologized narratives, we uncover a far more profound and unexpected insight. Sun Tzu was not fixated on the triumph of winning battles. Rather, his true obsession lay in the strategic avoidance of them altogether. His focus wasn't on glory, rigid discipline, or outright domination. Instead, it was acutely centered on one crucial factor: cost. In an ancient world that was literally hemorrhaging its resources through incessant warfare, Sun Tzu emerged as a groundbreaking thinker, articulating a truth that remains uncomfortably relevant. The most formidable threat to any state isn't the formidable foe standing before it, but the crushing financial burden that inevitably follows. While many perceive the art of war as a manual for combat, its deeper essence, ironically, is a treatise on fiscal prudence. Welcome to the Financial Historian, the unique intersection where the forces of money, power, and the sweep of history converge, revealing that reality is rarely as straightforward as it seems. To truly grasp the financial brilliance of Sun Tzu, one must first immerse themselves in the tumultuous era he inhabited, for his revolutionary concepts were not conjured from a vacuum. They arose from a civilization teetering on the brink, buckling under the sheer weight of its own grand ambitions. Picture China during the late spring and autumn period and the nascent warring states era, spanning roughly the 6th to 5th centuries BCE. This was a fragmented landscape of numerous kingdoms, each harboring the fervent belief that it alone could unite the world, and each relentlessly depleting its national treasury in a relentless pursuit of this goal. Warfare was not merely sporadic. It was an unrelenting constant. Alliances were forged only to swiftly crumble. Armies swelled in size with each passing decade, evolving dramatically from the ceremonial chariot duels of aristocrats to gargantuan infantry mobilizations that demanded unprecedented quantities of food, metal, intricate supply lines, and escalating taxes, a logistical nightmare on a scale unimaginable to prior generations. These states weren't just engaging in military skirmishes. They were, in effect, performing comprehensive stress tests on their entire economic systems. Every time a king dispatched an army into the field, he was essentially mortgaging his kingdom's future, taking out a monumental loan against its prosperity. And with alarming frequency, these financial gambles led to inevitable, often catastrophic, defaults. Many in Western audiences tend to romanticize ancient warfare, envisioning it primarily through a lens of tactical brilliance and heroic valor. However, during Sun Tzu's epoch, warfare was fundamentally a logistical challenge before it was anything else. The instant an army began its march, an invisible financial clock commenced its relentless ticking. The demands were staggering. Wagons for transport, vast stores of grain, countless horses, skilled craftsmen, armorers to equip the troops, cooks to feed them, blacksmiths for repairs, and porters to carry supplies, every single one requiring payment or sustenance. A military campaign extending beyond just a few months held the power to utterly bankrupt a smaller state. Should a campaign drag on for over a year, even a larger, seemingly robust kingdom could face total collapse. Yet, ensnared in an inescapable cycle of insecurity and mutual distrust, these kingdoms persisted in their incessant conflicts. It was, in essence, an arms race, long before the modern world coined the term, pushing the entire interconnected political and economic system to its absolute breaking point. This was precisely the tumultuous world Sun Tzu entered, not as an academic philosopher absorbed in serene contemplation, but as a pragmatic strategist compelled to unravel an economic catastrophe cleverly cloaked as a military predicament. Here in the West, we often romanticize him as a sort of ancient CEO whisperer, offering cryptic wisdom for corporate triumph. In truth, his role was far more akin to a sophisticated risk manager. He meticulously scrutinized the raw numbers, the projected costs, the critical timelines, and the intricate logistical demands, leading him to an undeniable conclusion: the prevailing methods by which states waged war were utterly unsustainable. He understood that a battlefield victory was utterly meaningless if, in achieving it, the national treasury was utterly depleted. Tragically, many rulers of his time failed to grasp this fundamental truth. They erroneously perceived the enemy's army as their paramount threat. Sun Tzu, with his unparalleled foresight, recognized that their own unrestrained spending posed a far greater danger. This profound understanding illuminates why the single most crucial declaration in the art of war appears right at its outset, long before Sun Tzu delves into the intricacies of deception, the advantages of terrain, or the nuances of troop morale. He starkly pronounces, "War is of vital importance to the state." Noticeably absent are descriptors like glorious or honorable. Instead, he chooses vital, a word loaded with implications of inherent danger, profound disruption, and the alarming potential to annihilate the very society it ostensibly exists to protect. The entire remainder of his seminal text is dedicated to meticulously detailing how to keep conflict contained, rigorously controlled, and, critically, as economically inexpensive as humanly possible. This approach, indeed, unveils his true underlying obsession, the uncompromising imperative of minimizing a state's financial exposure. Remarkably, even Sun Tzu's most celebrated maxims reveal themselves, upon closer inspection, to be shrewd economic principles cleverly cloaked in military language. When he famously declares, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting," this isn't some esoteric mystical pronouncement. It is, in fact, the purest articulation of cost avoidance. It represents the ancient world's ultimate equivalent of achieving a desired outcome without expending precious capital. Similarly, when he issues the dire warning that no nation has ever benefited from prolonged warfare, he is stating a literal, undeniable fiscal truth. The more protracted a military campaign becomes, the more it inexorably depletes and erodes the state's fundamental capacity to function and sustain itself. And his consistent emphasis on rapid execution, operational efficiency, meticulous intelligence gathering, and strategic psychological pressure isn't born of mere preference. It's because these ingenious tools are demonstrably and fundamentally far more economical than deploying and maintaining vast armies in direct conflict. Fundamentally, Sun Tzu's objective was not merely to secure victories on the battlefield. His overarching goal was to safeguard states from the calamitous fate of bankrupting themselves in their very attempt to win those battles. To truly appreciate the revolutionary nature of this philosophy, one must first grasp the landscape of Chinese warfare preceding his era. For centuries, the aristocratic elites engaged in highly ritualized conflicts where the pursuit of honor vastly overshadowed any concern for concrete outcomes, and the economic toll was barely a footnote in their calculations. However, with burgeoning populations and evolving weaponry, warfare mutated, scaling up into something almost unrecognizable. States were compelled to standardize coinage, overhaul their tax systems, and establish sprawling bureaucracies simply to sustain their ever-growing armies. Fighting thus transformed from isolated skirmishes into an all-encompassing national project, and, critically, an existential financial hazard. Sun Tzu acutely perceived that this antiquated mindset had become dangerously suicidal. War, he understood, could no longer be viewed as a grand stage for noble gestures or symbolic triumphs. It had unequivocally become a dire budgetary threat, demanding nothing less than a cold, utterly unsentimental economic analysis. This perspective is precisely what renders Sun Tzu such a singular anomaly in the annals of world history. While the vast majority of military strategists romanticized and glorified combat, he approached war with the dispassionate rigor of a balance sheet. He meticulously calculated the complexities of supply chains, the inevitable depletion of resources, and the critical concept of opportunity cost centuries before these precise terms were even conceived. He harbored absolutely no patience for generals who pursued personal glory at the perilous expense of state stability, for he grasped a fundamental truth that leaders even in our modern era frequently overlook. Every single decision made on the battlefield is, at its core, a profound decision concerning national solvency. And should one miscalculate these financial implications, the consequences extend far beyond the loss of soldiers. The entire state itself risks being irrevocably lost. When one finally delves into the art of war armed with this distinct economic lens, the entire text undergoes a radical transformation. It ceases to resonate as ancient, poetic wisdom and begins to sound remarkably like a meticulously compiled spreadsheet. Sun Tzu commences his seminal treatise by delineating the 5 fundamental factors that inherently dictate the outcome of any military conflict. Buried beneath what initially appears to be philosophical language lies a stark and simple truth. These are, in essence, cost variables. The moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method and discipline. These are not ethereal, mystical categories. They are, unequivocally, categories pertaining to resource management. Through them, he is implicitly posing crucial questions. What precise resources will this war demand? What is the underlying stability of your state's foundation? How resilient are your populace under duress? How efficiently can your forces mobilize and operate? How disciplined and effective is your administrative apparatus? In effect, he is performing a comprehensive risk assessment, an entire epoch before such a phrase entered common parlance. And from its very first page, Sun Tzu unequivocally asserts that leaders who demonstrate an inability to accurately calculate cost possess absolutely no business presuming to calculate strategy. This critical insight explains why such a substantial portion of the art of war is dedicated to the mundane yet vital aspects of logistics, rather than the romanticized theatrics of heroics. Sun Tzu allocates an entire, telling section to the harsh economics of sustaining an army, and his logic is unflinchingly brutal. When your army is 20 miles from home, you lose the price of 100 measures of grain. His message is strikingly clear: distance inherently escalates cost, and protracted distance multiplies that expense exponentially. He meticulously elucidates that the act of transporting supplies can deplete a state's treasury far more rapidly than merely paying the troops. Furthermore, he points out that maintaining an army in the field inevitably cripples the vital agricultural labor base, and that commanders who indulge in wasteful practices invariably lead their nations to ruin, even as they secure seemingly minor, ultimately meaningless skirmishes. For a work ostensibly categorized as a military treatise, it displays a remarkably pronounced disinterest in the actual combat itself, instead exhibiting an almost obsessive fascination with the true financial cost of battle. He sagely advises rulers to leverage the enemy's resources whenever feasible, not merely as a tactical advantage, but as a profound fiscal imperative. He sternly admonishes leaders who allow campaigns to become prolonged, not primarily for their perceived indecisiveness, but for their dangerous financial recklessness. Sun Tzu grasped a fundamental truth that many modern states regrettably tend to overlook. Logistics don't merely support strategy. Rather, logistics are strategy. Sun Tzu's discerning approach to intelligence gathering likewise underscores this pervasive financial logic. In our contemporary world, when governments engage in debates over expansive surveillance budgets, or when intelligence agencies lobby for increased funding, the discourse is typically framed through the lenses of national security, ethical considerations, or broad national interest. Sun Tzu, however, conceptualized it strictly in terms of raw cost efficiency. A solitary, well-placed spy, he meticulously explains, possesses the potential to prevent an entire army from embarking on a disastrous misdirection. A single, judiciously intercepted message can avert expenditures amounting to millions for a nation. He famously articulates that what enables the wise sovereign and the good general to strike and conquer, and achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary men, is foreknowledge, explicitly prioritizing it above mere courage or brute force. This foreknowledge, in essence, is simply the ancient world's precise term for actionable data. Sun Tzu perceived information not as a mere supplementary accessory to warfare, but as the most economical and profoundly effective weapon at a state's disposal. He stands as arguably the first strategist to truly comprehend that the misallocation of vital information is, fundamentally, a catastrophic misallocation of capital. Even his pronounced emphasis on speed is, at its core, driven by economic rationale. Speed is the essence of war, he famously penned, a declaration most readers instinctively interpret as a forceful advocacy for swift, aggressive action. Yet, Sun Tzu's true meaning is far more nuanced and profound. Speed, quite simply, reduces cost. When he implores commanders to move swiftly where the enemy does not expect you, he is outlining a sophisticated cost-benefit maneuver, employing impeccable timing and strategic deception to bypass the enormous expenses associated with direct, pitched conflict. Each passing day an army dedicates to marching, being fed, or simply waiting dramatically escalates its financial exposure. A victory delayed is, in his view, capital irrevocably incinerated. Conversely, a victory secured through ingenious maneuver, rather than through brutal attrition, judiciously preserves invaluable resources. Sun Tzu's celebrated preference for strategic flexibility, rapid adaptability, and psychological advantage is not merely philosophical elegance. It is, at its heart, an unwavering commitment to fiscal discipline. However, Sun Tzu's most profound financial insight is meticulously woven into the very fabric and structure of the art of war itself. Virtually every line subtly addresses the concept of opportunity cost. Every strategic choice a ruler exercises inherently forecloses the possibility of a less expensive alternative. Sun Tzu does not, in fact, inherently oppose warfare. Rather, his opposition is fiercely directed at waste. And the ultimate form of waste, from his perspective, is engaging in battles that were entirely avoidable. This profound belief explains why he lauds generals who manage to shatter enemy resistance without resorting to bloodshed, those who achieve victory through the astute application of diplomacy, calculated intimidation, clever misdirection, or the formation of strategic alliances. For Sun Tzu, these are not mere secondary or alternative strategies. They are, unequivocally, the primary means of engagement, precisely because they painstakingly conserve the state's finite and precious capital. In one of his most deeply revealing passages, he issues a stark warning. Rulers who indulge in warfare for its own inherent sake will inevitably usher catastrophic ruin upon their kingdoms. Stripped of its poetic phrasing, this encapsulates a cold, immutable accounting principle. If one treats war as an intoxicating passion rather than a severe financial liability, the inevitable outcome is national default. The undeniable clarity of Sun Tzu's financial genius is further underscored by the historical outcomes of the states surrounding him. Their very success or collapse often hinged on whether they heeded his counsel. Some kingdoms, tragically, squandered their immense wealth into protracted, resource-draining sieges that utterly decimated their tax base and left them tragically vulnerable to internal insurrections. Conversely, other states judiciously applied Sun Tzu's sophisticated logic, skillfully employing superior information, strategic alliances, and swift, decisive strikes to entirely circumvent the ruinous economic spiral of prolonged conflict. Those states that astutely recognized war for what it truly was, a potent financial instrument, to be wielded with utmost restraint and strategic precision, demonstrably endured longer. The kingdoms that, instead, treated warfare as a mere test of honor or raw brute strength inevitably burned themselves out. Sun Tzu was not merely theoretically correct. The undeniable verdict of history proved him profoundly right in practice. And it is at this juncture that our narrative pivots dramatically from ancient geopolitical analysis to a relevance that is strikingly contemporary. For the unsettling truth is that Sun Tzu's prescient warnings have reverberated, with often tragic accuracy, through virtually every major conflict of the past 2 centuries. Modern governments, with disheartening regularity, continue to commit the very same errors he so diligently sought to prevent. They plunge into wars without rigorously calculating the immense, long-term economic strain, only to witness their national budgets fragment and unravel under the pressure. Consider the fate of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, the United States in Vietnam, or the imperial powers embroiled in World War I. These conflicts were not ultimately lost because their armies lacked strength or valor. They were lost, fundamentally, because the unsustainable economic models underpinning them ultimately crumbled. Sun Tzu, were he alive today, would have recognized this recurring pattern instantly. Prolonged warfare, in its insatiable appetite, erodes the very foundations of the state far more swiftly and profoundly than any external enemy ever could. Concurrently, the very instruments Sun Tzu championed, sophisticated intelligence gathering, strategic deception, surgically targeted operations, and rapid, agile maneuvering, have evolved into the indispensable backbone of modern military and geopolitical strategy. The profound reason for their ascendancy is remarkably simple. They are fundamentally cheaper. The emergence of cyber warfare embodies Sun Tzu's principles. Economic sanctions are, in essence, Sun Tzu in action. Proxy wars, subtle covert influence operations, and the intricate dance of strategic deterrence. All of these contemporary approaches are meticulously designed to achieve maximum desired effect, while incurring the absolute minimal financial exposure. Indeed, the world's most formidable states, whether consciously aware of it or not, continue to operate within the immutable framework of Sun Tzu's financial balance sheet. Yet, perhaps the most transparent and compelling modern manifestation of Sun Tzu's enduring influence lies in how contemporary nations conceptualize the very essence of national power. Sun Tzu firmly posited that the true strength of a state did not reside solely in the formidable might of its army, but rather in its underlying economic resilience, its innate capacity to absorb severe shocks, recover from adversity, and steadfastly continue functioning. He penned his insights during an era where numerous kingdoms disintegrated not from direct military defeat, but because they grotesquely overspent on military campaigns they simply could not sustain. Today, we inhabit a world where great powers confront precisely the same fundamental dilemma, albeit draped in different modern garb. Spiraling military budgets, crushing national debt burdens, perilous resource dependencies, the inherent fragility of global supply chains, and the immense long-term cost associated with projecting force across vast distances. Sun Tzu, while undoubtedly unfamiliar with our cutting-edge technology, would instantly recognize and grasp the fundamental, unchanging math. The more profound lesson here, a truth often overlooked by the majority, is that Sun Tzu's primary objective was not to instruct rulers on the art of winning wars. Instead, he was meticulously guiding them on how to strenuously avoid national bankruptcy. His unparalleled genius lay in his acute understanding that the true, multifaceted cost of conflict far outlives the immediate duration of the conflict itself. States, he recognized, do not primarily fail because they suffer battlefield defeats. States fail, catastrophically, because they inexorably drain the vital capital